Welcome back. So I'm just making the final changes here on the data access layer. I'm adding in the new create authorization function, which is the application user ID, and then the client ID, the created I feel like I shouldn't have deleted where that was happening. So back over here in the JWT service, right here, let's add this one down here for generate token. This is a new token response. And we'll add that one back in. And that needs to be a I token response. And we're going to say the access token is access token. The refresh token is the refresh token. Token type is the token type. Expires in is expires in, and then we also need to have state. Okay. And this needs to be a task.from result of this. Like that. Okay. The next one here is we have this update refresh token. Let's finish this one. I was looking at where we were creating the authorization code. Here. So in this, we were just passing in the string. So the code got that already. Which is being encoded. Created equals date time.utc now. Created by IP is created by IP. Redirect URI, I've got that, and it's encoded. Client ID I've got, and scopes. We've got expires. But is that a get? I think that's a get. Nope, expires is a get set. So this is going to be a datetime.utcnow.addDays, and it's my expiration time in days. No, that's the wrong one. It's datetime UTC.add minutes, lifespan minutes. And that's it. And then this is going to be my code and redirect URI. NuGets and refresh tokens for dinner, my fave. How are you doing there, Chuck? It's good to have you with us, man. How are you? This project's almost done. I'm doing the refactor and getting it ready to push out. Okay, so that's good there. We had another one that we needed to do, which was this update refresh token. And this is passing in a I refresh token, which is not what we want. It'll work. But the easiest way is to do this and look at my I refresh token. Not that way. Look at this one. And the properties that we need when we create it are string for the application user ID, GUID for the client ID, a string for the scopes, and int for the expiration time and days. We also want to get a string for the refresh token. So I want to do, we'll just copy this little bit here. Confused. Okay, open that again. This one. Sorry, it's this one here. We're going to just grab this. And then I'm going to do a refresh token dot I don't need these because this doesn't change. Refresh token entity dot see, but you first need to have the refresh token. And then you want to change this. Where you were calling this update refresh token asynchronous. I'm taking notes. I'll have to introduce those for our first microservice at work soon. Oh, here, I've got this for you. What is this thing called? This project is full open source. You'll be able just to launch a Docker container with it. Replace my token ID. So iRefresh token needs to inherit from iBase entity. Right? Of a ID. Now that should work. So I'm calling this from the token controller. Where I'm generating a new token, getting the refresh token, revoking it, and updating it. So in my update, I want to take the ID, the date time for revoked time, the date time for, I'm sorry, the string for revoked by IP, and then a GUID for a GUID nullable GUID called replaced by token ID. So here I want to set the revoke time to be revoke time, the refresh token entity dot revoked by IP equals revoked by IP, and the replaced by token ID as my new replaced by token ID. And then I want to refresh this entity like that. Now I'm going to call this a revoke refresh token. And we'll move that to the data access layer. And we're going to pass in the ID, the date time.utc now, the IP address, and the new refresh token.id. I successfully used Azure Active Directory and their identity server. I think I understand the essential of it. Only little details I'm worried about. This one is there's multiple layers of it, right? So the simple one is the auth. It's for authentication, and that's just JWT tokens, JSON Web Tokens. And it's like a token that's got 3 parts on it. The first 2 identify it, and the third one is a signature that is an asymmetric key that if you have it on both sides, I'm sorry, it's a symmetric key, so if you have it on both sides, you can validate the token. The second layer is OAuth, which is OAuth 2.0. That's for authorization flow. There's 4 main types of that. Implicit, resource owner, credentials, which is username, password, authorization code, and client credentials. Those are all contained in this app here. And then that still requires a little bit of work on the users on the developer side to get it implemented. So the next layer on top of this would be an OIDC server for the OpenID Connect, and that has a discovery document, so they can APIs can easily grab the metadata associated with those services. Yeah, JWT is what I use too. So we first started by scaffolding this JWT.net project, which is pretty much just interfaces and one concrete class. Okay. So we got just a few little errors here to fix. So the first one is create client. Doesn't like that get client isn't returning this object. Same thing here. Same thing here. And again here. Okay, there's no more active flag, so we're just going to do a remove. We just need to cast these. And is that it? Almost. Okay, this generate says that I need to have state. When I generate the token, but that can be nullable, right? No, it's actually hard-coded in there. So we want to make sure we are always including state. So this is now called Revoke refresh token. And we want to do it by the ID, the date time .utc now. The IP that it's replaced by is IP address, and the GUID here that it's replaced by is null, which means that in this we want to change this to be GUID nullable, which is called ID nullable, and this is called ID. And this is ID nullable. So we're going to say ID nullable replaced by token ID. And then we're going to add that onto the interface. And we'll add in ID nullable. Okay, we need to add in the code here, which is a generate random token string. This now wants me to have a ID nullable in here. Which is now a GUID like that. Like that. And then finally, revoke refresh token of that. Okay, we did this one. The last one is this add refresh token. So you want to do var token equals new refresh token. And it's going to be the application user ID equals application user ID, the client ID equals client ID, the token equals. Now, where I was doing this before, I don't know if I was encoding this before. It's happening in the data access layer, and we weren't. So we'll just do it straight across. Token. Created equals created. We can get rid of created and expires. And this is date time.utc now. And this expires equals date time.utc now dot add days expiration time and days. Created by IP as IP address. We want to add on another GUID here for the replaced by token ID. So we don't need this one. We don't need the revoked by. Scopes. Timestamp is automatic. I think that's it. Okay, and then we're going to do a context.refresh tokens.add my refresh token, and then we're going to do return. It's going to be await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Then we want to return the await get refresh token asynchronous of my refresh token.id. Otherwise, I want to get the null. So up here, we need to have a new function called getRefreshToken with just the ID. Which we'll add over here. On the client side of things, I'm curious to know how you proceed to make sure that the token is refreshed on each request if needed. I'm used to things like rest_sharp for simple stuff, so I have to make my own layer in front of it to make sure. Well, it depends on what client you're using. Are you using Angular? Are you using ASP.NET MVC? Because ASP.NET MVC is server-side rendered, Angular is client-side rendered, so that's the first question about the client side. So down here we have add refresh token, which is string token. The scopes expiration times created by IP. I'm not even close to those things. More like WPF desktop application. Okay. So for something like that, if you were to send a request to the API with a token that was expired or revoked, you would get back a bad request or a 401 unauthorized, right? So your desktop application would need to add that into the header, right? That's pretty much it. And then if it comes back a 401, then use the refresh token, grab a new one, and then make the request a second time. You would want to use resource owner password credentials probably for that, but you'd probably want to use the PKCE model. Or I'd do it implicit. I'd do it implicit flow, honestly. And have it launch a browser. What's wrong here? This. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I want to extract the interface here, and I'm going to call it auth server data access layer. And in this one, I'm going to have it inherit from this. And now we can get rid of the additional methods. And that's it. To keep things as clean as possible. And now in my startup, I can change this to be a auth server data access layer. And I'm going to call this auth server data access layer. Okay, we're going to make another class in here called iAuth server JWT service. And I want to inherit from this and then I'm going to make another one called auth server JWT service. We want to make it inherit from that. And this needs to inherit from iAuth server JWT service, like that. And then we're going to make one more for the user service. iAuth server user service. And we want to inherit from auth server user service. I'm sorry, just we want to inherit from, where did it go? This. And we want to make this an interface. Beautiful. Okay. So basically, you have to make sure. Looked around if REST any way to handle it doesn't seem so. Look up OIDC. That's what that would be the layer that I think you want. And this one now we can change this just to be iAuth server user service, like that. It's a layer on top of the OAuth server, and that's actually what we're going to be implementing next, as soon as I get this one pushed out. And that's it. Let's go ahead and rebuild everything. Now in these controllers, I need to look in this project for anywhere that I have JWT service. And this is now called iAuth JWT service. This is iAuth server user service. And iAuth server data access layer. So we're going to check the controllers here. So iAuth service data access layer. That one is iAuth service data access layer, and then iAuth server JWT service. That's right. User manager should get replaced. So we're going to say iAuth server JWT service, and then iUser iAuth server user service. And same thing with this one. Okay, so we'll get rid of the sign-in manager here. And in my user service, I want to add a sign-in manager. And now if I look at the functions that I need, we want to do a public virtual asynchronous task of a whatever. And I want to do await sign-in manager dot configure external authentication providers. We want this to be a provider name and a redirect URI. Sorry, there's no await. So this is a authentication properties. So we're going to say authentication properties. And this is going to be say authenticate third party login. And we'll say asynchronous. And then this will be a task dot from result of this. And then we can add that to this one. And now I can do a user service dot authenticate third party login for Google and redirect URL. This needs to be an await. And this needs to be an asynchronous task. And now in the Google response, I need to have another one here, just called a public virtual task of whatever. And it's going to be a sign-in manager.external login sign-in asynchronous. And this is going to also require a get external login info asynchronous. This result is this is where you're doing the sign in. So this is going to say challenge third-party login. And this one's going to say login third-party. We're going to say external login sign in asynchronous. And this one's going to be external login challenge asynchronous. So if my info is equal to null, then I want to return. Otherwise, I want to do a result equals my sign in manager dot external login sign in for my info dot login provider info dot provider key, and the false, it's not persistent. We're just going to say bool. This is going to be false, and then we want to do a return result dot succeeded. Hey, Dragon Dust. Dragon Dust. How are you doing? Welcome to the channel. Okay, here we're going to do a await user service dot external login sign in. And if this is true, then we can do the parsed query string. And we're going to say to do we need this? Okay, this add refresh token doesn't need these two. This client is an iClient of type GUID. So I could make this a little cleaner, and we could add in here a interface. And I'm going to say that this is called a iAuth server client, which is a interface, and it just inherits from iClient of a GUID. Now, if I wanted to get really creative, I can probably do iClient like that. And then this is from, it's inherent. So this is just now iClient. So in my data access layer, we can now change all of these just to be iClient. Now it doesn't like that because I'm not matching the right type. So we'll just leave it like that. But then over here I could just say iClient. Okay, our last two little bits here is we have a get application user by string and password. So this is going to be get application user by my username and password. And then you're going to generate the token. Let's go ahead and rebuild it. Just a few more little changes here. In my seed data, this client's can I do this as a iClient array? And then this is as iClient. Like that. This is an iClient course origin of a GUID. Like that. So if instead I did this as a this, and then I said new iClient of GUID, can I get away without these? Yes. Like that. We rebuild it. And everything built. Okay, moment of truth. We're going to delete the database and we will rescaffold it. Add migration, a init, and it's going to be in the output directory of data migrations. couldn't resolve auth server data access layer while activating seed data. Which is right. And this is IAuth service user service. And I want to get this one, and I want to say, let's go actually one more layer and get the application user by name. And this is going to be a you want to add a new task of a application user called a create application user asynchronous, and you're going to pass in an application user. And you want to also include the password. So if my admin user is null, then we're going to seed it. Okay, we'll try it again, rebuild everything. We got our error here because we don't have the get application user by name here, which is just it's a virtual asynchronous method. We're going to do a return await user manager dot find by name asynchronous of my username. And the create application user, we'll put it here. Virtual asynchronous task. And I want to say return, no, var result equals await user manager dot create asynchronous of my application user and then the password. If my result dot succeeded, then I want to return await get application user asynchronous by my application user dot ID. Okay. Rebuild it again. And there it is. So we're going to try to make this again. auth server JWT service. Okay, so in here, it says that it can't resolve these two. back over here in Startup. I wonder if I can get creative with this and do a data access layer of a GUID nullable, and then a string. And we can just point it to that one. And the next one is, these are required for jwt.net. Is the so instead of doing this, I'm going to change this just a little bit. And I'm going to add in here a data access layer of my ID nullable and my app user ID. Like that. And then I also want to include the user service. Now, when this is created here, we have to pass in the auth. It's a auth server data access layer, and then a auth server user service. Okay, also on the user service, JWT service is resolving data access layer on the user service. I think that's right. Let's try it again. There it is. So now we can do an update. Well, we don't need to do that. It should automatically update it when I run the project, assuming that I deleted it. Where is it? Okay, we'll run it. It'll apply the migration. Give it just a second. There it is. Migration's completed. So all of that work was successful. So now we have the JWT layer out. So the next layer that I want to remove is we're going to pull these services, the middleware, not the middleware, the models into a project here called it's a .NET Standard class library. I'm going to name this thing correctly this time, and we're going to call it OAuthServer.net. And now in this one, I want to bring the majority of what's in here. So we want to bring over these controllers. This context. We're going to leave the middleware. We'll bring over the models. There they are. We'll bring over the services. And then we also need to bring over the views. Now we don't need view start is just the layout. View imports are these, and now we want to add in the OAuthServer.net and then OAuthServer.net not models. Now, before I go any further, I want to make a commit on this. And I'm going to say added jwt.net, and we'll click that and push that out. And push that out. Which means that now I can go ahead and delete my controllers. I don't need all of them. I'm going to get rid of the everything but the home controller. Which means on the home here we can keep it and get rid of home and these views. We can get rid of the data folder. We can get rid of the models folder. We can get rid of the services folder. Now for our views, we want these. Hey there, APL3B. How are you doing? Thank you so much there for that follow. If you have any questions, what I'm working on, please don't hesitate to pop them into the chat. Appreciate that support. Login. That looks right. So we can get rid of the login ones here. Our shared. I'm going to keep these here and these, and we're going to try to see what I can do when I hack them. And now we're going to change this to be in only the current project to be a auth server to be OAuth server. And we'll change all those. We need to add in here ASP.NET MVC. Building an OAuth app. What for? Hey, APL3B. So I've been using Identity Server 4 on all my projects for quite some time now. If you take a look at the Identity Server 4 GitHub, that as of October 1st, 2020, they started a new company, and all new work is going to be under this new thing called Duende Identity Server, which is under a commercial license. So this is pretty something I need to fix immediately because, again, all of my applications are built on top of IS4. So I'm making this completely open source identity server, if you will. It's called, we have the first one called JWT.NET, which is just this little library down here. Now we're adding in the OAuth server.NET. We're going to add OIDC on top. It's going to be out on NuGet and then also out at Docker, so you can just run it and then register your clients on a UI. Yeah. Or you just pay for it, you know? So let's go ahead and install this one. It's all right. I mean, the code base is hard to read, I feel like, when I've dug into it. It's kind of convoluted. Oh, here we go. I was like, that's odd. That's a lot of errors. Hey, add a stupid reference. Oh, it's because this one is the wrong version. Okay. Now we're saying that this is a home controller. It's just controller. Yeah, but I have to give it to them. They do a lot of the things right out of the box. Otherwise, at least my company would have had a lot of my stuff broken sec-wise. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's why I've used it on all of my projects, because it kind of like handles a lot of that behind the scenes for you. What's nice about the OAuth server is that the OAuth protocol itself is pretty straightforward. Registering the app on it and then just making 2 calls from a web app is pretty straightforward. OIDC gets a little bit more complicated, and that's where I think it gets a little bit anomalous. So one of the goals of this project is to try to separate this into 3 separate layers: the JWT.NET package, the OAuth server.NET package, and then the OIDC server package. Okay, we'll add this in. And then our reference to the services. This one needs to have an identity. I see. For the discovery endpoints and whatnot, will you still support the new schemes for WT, new ciphers and stuff, or just the .NET Core ones for now? I'm going to try to get as much as I can. When we've been building this, we've been going right off of the protocols, so I'm not going by any tutorials. So whatever's in the protocol is what I'm trying to get. And so the discovery documents, I believe, specifies that I need to include all the different ciphers. .NET Standard 2.1. Looks good. Remove some of these that we're not using. Add in the application user. And we can get rid of these two. And then this one and this one. And we can just add in our app exception. We gotta fix these. For our seed data. But actually your seed data you want to... No, we'll have that separate. Okay. So just like that. This thing doesn't know where the variables class is, which is true. I've removed it for now. So let's add in authserver.net variables again. And that needs to be in 2.1. And we're going to get rid of that before the end. We need to add in the helper. The core standard suite only specifies a set of protocols based on a pre-shared key and public-private key and nothing at all, but now there's an extension where you can throw in more exotic stuff. Yeah, I saw the extension stuff as well, so I was going to take a look at that and see as much as we can. But again, the whole project is open source, so anybody can make a commit onto it. The get for the project is here. It's going to change, though, to this. So feel free to make sure to make some commits onto this, and we can make it anything we want. All right, let's check it now. Okay, it says sign-in manager could not be found. We want to add in the ASP.NET.Core.Identity. And rebuild. Just a few more. Okay, our migrations are bad, so we'll get rid of those for now. And that's it. So now when I run this application here, first thing is that it's going to fail because the migrations aren't there. We're going to change the connection string here to point to authserver.net. And I'll do a add migration init. This one. And then we'll do an update database. It says build failed. Why would this be failing? Use identity column not found entity framework. What is wrong here? So we are going to look at this again for the NuGet packages that are installed. Is it this 5.1? If I go back to 3, same issue. What is wrong? If I look at my packages here, let's add in some of these. That one's right. We have the new one. This one, Entity Framework Core. Okay, that got rid of a lot of them. We also want to get the one which is for SQL Server. And we'll rebuild it. Let's try it again. and it worked. Okay, and now, because everything is scaffolded here through the way that this discovery works, we're going to go to the if my parameters is string is null or white space of my parameters, then I want to return a bad request. Okay. So now what I want to see is when we go to the authorized controller that when I hit, we want to do it from this client. So let's rebuild him or her. And it's going to say it doesn't have the JWT service, but we can add it in. And it is a GUID string and a GUID like that. We need to register that in here. Oh, in order to have this, you actually have to have a data access layer as well. So we'll remove that. And this one. We don't need the context or the identity or authorization. Almost done. Okay, our startup needs a little bit of cleanup. And here in the implicit controller, we don't need user manager, sign-in manager, or JWT. And then in this one, you can get rid of JWT. Okay, and so now when I run this, and then I run the client, it says 404, which is exactly what we expect. All right, everything just crashed. With any luck, I didn't lose anything. We try it again. This time we're going to start both projects. Let's just jump over and do this one. So now when we go to RO password, there we go. It hits and it says 500. What is happening to my app here? It gave me a 500. Which is weird. If I try this again, instead we just issue a get on authorize. Okay. That did take. And that should be a post, so it's not gonna work. So back over here, if I change this to be a auth, come on. Code index. Couldn't find the view for login. So if I was just to copy these in here temporarily and try it again, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to say ASP.NET Core views in class library. That didn't seem helpful at all. A little bit confused here because I thought for sure it would have pulled in the views, but if I was to bring in the views for login, try it again. Yeah, see, now it's working with those views there. And the controller's somewhere else. $500 again on that token. So the token endpoint is returning 500. Because of this. There it is. It sends it across. We get the response. It is a successful response code. And it doesn't have the view for RO password. Which is okay. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to C# ASP.NET Core views controllers class library. Use a Razor class library to include views in the assembly. Razor class library. Okay. So can I just bring in views? Let's see, will that work? And then I want to add my project reference to be the one from Razor. These things say it can't find oh shit. You're gonna need to bring everything in, right? Okay, we're gonna try this a different way. Get rid of this. We're gonna bring all of this stuff into here. I'm going to unload this one. Okay, this needs to have all of those same dependencies on it. So we have install package Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Identity Entity Framework Core. Install package Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. We want to do the same one without SQL Server. And this one, we can clear some of these namespaces that we don't need. And we can add in a reference to the variables project. This one we want to add in Microsoft.Entity Framework. Okay, we've got all that. So let me go ahead and clear it and run it again. This one we want to add in the references. Just 9 errors remain. Not even. Let's clean it, rebuild everything. And everything built. So this time when I run it, okay, we'll go to the RO password. It did hit the token endpoint. Okay, let's go to the authorization code. And it was supposed to redirect me to it worked. And there it is. So it's working now. Okay. So we can remove this one. And now we've got everything separated into a separate package that we can just install. Let's go ahead and rename this. Just that. And then we can get rid of this area. There we go. Still have the middleware and everything. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name of this project to be osserver.net.webapp. oauthserver.net. Like that. And then this one, we're going to change this to be called oauthserver.net variables. If I look at these, I'm going to bring these into the web app. Actually, no. We're going to bring these into the... We need these in the web app. Then we can remove this. We can put this in here as the oauth server.net web app. And we need to do the same thing with the actual file itself. And there we go. So the next thing that I want to do is change this Let me just fix these. Almost done. So in your introspect controller, you need to have the globals, right? For your username. So we're just going to say client.clientName. We'll just say audience. Now this is in the client. We just want to do that. Just a few more. And we'll rebuild. We're going to rename this oauthserver.net and then the client oauthserver.net. Like that. And we'll clean it and then build everything again. Now I want to show you the next thing I want to do. So these are in my .NET client. It says it can't find the login pages. I think it's just because of that. Yeah. Okay. The last one is this API here, which we're just going to rename. Come on, don't die. So we're going to reload this project. Like that. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is if I look inside OAuth.net under my controllers for authorize, it said something failed. You can see that once we get past here, or once we get the client, this should go into a business logic layer. And we should be evaluating the origin URIs based on the individual clients and in the logic layer, so that way people can expand these. So at this point, when we receive back the client, this should be enough for me to start to build the business logic layer, which is what we're going to put in these areas. But for me, I'm going to get some lunch. So thank you guys for staying with me. We'll be back. Let's see. If we'll be back today, then we'll say we're going to aim for like 4:30. But if not, then it'll be at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So thanks again for staying with me today. If you have any questions, make sure you pop them into the Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com, and I put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. I appreciate you guys staying with me today, and I'll see you in the morning. Have a good one. Or a little bit later today. Have a good one. Bye, guys.